Hello, fellow book enthusiasts. So today I'm going to be talking about George Orwell's 1984. Let me set this camera up better. Yeah, that's much better. Cool. So it was a long time ago. It was about 2 or 3 years that I read George Orwell's 1984. And so I'm going to talk mainly about the plot. There's going to be some spoilers, that's what I'm saying. So if you haven't already read it, blah, 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 do I recommend it? No, not really. I don't think it's the greatest book ever written. I don't think it's worth a read considering the amount of books that we have and the amount of stories that are out in the world. Definitely in today's society where films seem to be more popular than books. If you want to read a book to get into books, you should start with a good one. George Orwell, 1984, very depressing. If you're into all the cynical, depressing reads, you might like it because it's a commentary on just how dark human nature is. So if you want to read about the dark side of human nature and the cynical view of the planet that we live on, then read it. But if you want something that is more uplifting, that is not the book for you. I'm going to delve into the plot that I remember, and so spoilers. What I remember about this book, we have this character Winston, and so I wanted to talk about the fact that there's a big brother. There's Big Brother. That's the overbearing government, and the acts as the antagonist throughout the whole book. And working for Big Brother, we have this character Brian, who at the beginning of the book you think is good, and later on you understand that he's actually working for Big Brother, and everything was a setup that he was going to say to Winston that there was some other secret power that was fighting Big Brother, as I remember, but actually Brian turns out to be the villain, and he ends up converting Winston into somebody who submits to Big Brother. The scene, the setting, there's 3 different areas, 3 different divisions of the world, and they're all at war with one another, and it's a continuous war which only exists to keep people under the power of Big Brother, because people will only submit if they're fighting against someone. So there's a perpetual fighting in order that people will submit to a power. Which is, I think, a commentary on the state of the world. Like I said, it's a very cynical book, and you argue that our world that we currently live in is continuously at war. Is it just a tactic of a domineering government who want people to submit? Why are we not in a state of peace? Is it because war helps to keep the overbearing powers in charge? Which is a mindset that obviously many people take. I prefer to come from a mindset of fighting for peace, love and harmony, which is why I didn't really enjoy the read, because it comes from a very cynical place. There was a very shocking moment in the book where Winston is forced to discover his true evil nature, and it's where Winston has a love, Julia, and Brian takes Winston to Room 101, which Room 101 in Britain was a comedy show. And so, side point, I digress from the point I was originally making. Side point is that this book, 1984, has had a huge influence on British culture and UK culture and global culture, I imagine, because it had this TV show Room 101, which comedians went on to put what they hated in Room 101. And also we had a TV show, Big Brother. Everybody in the UK will know that. If you're a Russian viewer, it's a bit similar to Dom 2, Big Brother was, but it took its name, Big Brother, from 1984, George Orwell's book. And I wanted to make a note of George Orwell imagining a future where there was a lot of black screens that watched you everywhere you go. So you would have a big black screen on your wall which could hear you and see you and report all of your actions to Big Brother. So you were continuously being watched by the government to make sure that you were acting in line with what Big Brother wanted you to do, which was to submit. Winston was able to find an alcove in his apartment and write a journal about his doubts about Big Brother. However, he eventually got caught. Any neighbours who understood that people were going against Big Brother or slandering Big Brother would snitch on their neighbours, and these people would be collected and taken to Room 101 and go through the torture that would proceed from this. So Winston was able to find an alcove in his apartment and have that space where he could write the journal, which he could put his doubts in there, but it was the only space that he could have. Very interesting that this book was written years before 1984, imagining 1984 as the year of the future and saying that there's going to be black screens following you around. And this is why it's interesting to read if you're a writer and you're getting into dystopian novels, because George Orwell has imagined a future. And we are now living in that future. We have TVs, we have phones, we have iPads. They're all black screens. They can all hear us, see us, take photos of us when we're not aware, and report that information to God knows who. And by the way, track our location, knowing where we are all the time. So we are living in the future, a similar future to what George Orwell originally imagined, which is why I think it's such a influential book and has become a classic, because that society that George Orwell dreamt of is very similar to the one that we are living in now, and it's very interesting to wonder why and how an author could do that, could imagine that. Or is it just entirely a coincidence? And so there's this moment in the book where Brian puts a cage of rats up against Winston's face, and then is threatening to open the cage door so that the rats, who haven't eaten anything for a very long time, will burrow through Winston's eyes into his brain, making him blind. And Winston has the fear of rats. That's why they're in Room 101, because it's what you fear. And Winston says, "Please do it to Julia. Anyone but me. Please make it happen to Julia." And it's in that moment where he realizes that his love for Julia is not sacred, that actually he will put himself before his love, that he will sacrifice and wish pain upon the person that he loves in order to protect himself. And then in that moment he realizes the dark nature of himself. And that's a very grim place for a man to go. And I would like to think I'm a fighter for love. I mean, it's just dark. It's a commentary on the selfish nature of human beings. As I get older, I want to fight for the purity of love more and more, because I realise how rare it really is, that most people in the world are entirely selfish. And I would like to be an advocate for love. Sounds hopelessly romantic, but if I don't do it, who will? Because just humans are dark and selfish, and they can be. And I hope that if I'm ever in the situation where there's a cage of rats about to burrow into my eyeballs, I would take that pain in order to save someone else. Because that is a heroic thing to do. But I'm not in that situation. And I hope I never am. Because I wouldn't want to have that grim realization that Winston had, which was, oh my God, we're all evil in our core. That's why it's a grim book. But I also think that possibly the whole thing at the end was a metaphor for heaven. He's in a white, timeless room, and he's being tortured. And maybe all of that, maybe Big Brother is a metaphor for God, and that he's actually being tortured and tortured and tortured to lose his ego. And maybe when he finally submits to Big Brother, who is a metaphor for God, in this white eternal room, and submits, and he accepts Big Brother as his leader, maybe that's not a tragedy. Maybe that's him losing his ego and accepting a God, and accepting that he is nothing in comparison with that leader. So if you look at it from that perception, it could be, religiously, an allegory with a positive ending. I'm an eternal optimist, so I would naturally perceive it in that way. So it's just something to think about. Whereas most people would assume the ending of Big Brother of 1984 was a tragedy, and possibly is. There is a positive twist that you can put on it. So that's my thoughts on the book. I'm going to stop there. Again, I don't think you should read it, but if you have done, think about what I've said and leave a comment below about what you think is the symbolism of 1984. That's all for now.